What's up, folks? It's 2Bricks, and today we're going to be doing a combined review and kind of new system overview video that's going to take a look at the entire first wave of LEGO Smart Play. If you guys don't know, if you're not up on the hobby and you haven't been following along, LEGO Smart Play revolves around the Smart Brick, which is this thing right here. So I'm going to take a second and explain what that is, and then we're going to dive into the reviews of each individual set. I'm going to give you my thoughts about what works and what doesn't. There's actually a lot of things that I think do work and a lot of things that I think do not. So I'm going to go over all of that for you, and I'm going to give my recommendations for if you should invest in the system, and if you are going to, what I think you should do and how you should approach it. So stay tuned for all of that. And then at the very end, I'm going to give you my thoughts on how I think this thing could have been an absolute smash success and the missed opportunities that are inherent within the system, because it is a great idea. I feel it has just been executed quite poorly in a lot of aspects, but there is still hope for it in the future. So lots to go over today. Please do stay tuned. I actually am recording this now for the second time because the first video that I did was 90 minutes long when I edited it down, and I'm not going to ask you to sit through 90 minutes to discuss this little thing right here. So yeah, I'm going to just try to gather my thoughts a little bit more efficiently this time, and we'll go through it more quickly. So time codes are down in the description if you want to jump around, if you're looking to see the review for a particular set. So without further ado, let's jump in and take a look. All right, so in a nutshell, what is the Smart Play system? So you have the Smart Brick. This is a thing that is filled with sensors, and it has the ability to produce lights and sounds, and it produces sounds using an onboard synthesizer. And so it can make very basic kind of 8-bit sounding noises that can emulate certain kind of effects and music and things of that sort, but in a very, very basic way. So you're not going to be getting professional quality sound out of this thing. Then you have the smart tags. So these tell the Smart Brick things that it can do, behaviors that it can emulate. So these are attached to the build, and in some cases even a minifigure like R2-D2 here, and those activate certain behaviors within the brick. Then you have the Smart Figs. These are kind of the central core component to this, other than the Smart Brick, in the fact that each of these have information that they communicate to the brick regarding who the character is and how they should behave when they're interacting with smart tags within the world of Smart Play. It sounds way cooler than it is, and I'll show you when we actually get into demonstrating this thing how actually not cool all of this actually ended up being. And then lastly, it comes with a charger here, so you're going to charge these things up for 2 hours to get 40 minutes of continuous play out of it. Now, it's probably going to feel like a lot longer than 40 minutes, even if kids are playing pretty actively, because this thing turns off pretty quickly after you stop using it, and then you shake it to wake it up, and then the battery starts draining down at that point. But it is pretty good about saving the actual power and everything. The only trouble with this thing is that it does not have a power source, so you have to supply your own if you're going to plug it into the wall, or obviously a lot of people have the ability to just plug that into a pre-existing USB, so it's not a huge deal. But for me, I just wish wall sockets were more of a thing. And then here is where you can charge two at once. You place them side by side, and it's just wireless, so it just has to sit in this little tray to charge up, and that's that. I do wish this had a couple of studs on it or something, some way to connect this as a Lego element, because it's a really cool big blocky piece, and I would like to use it in a mock in some fashion, but it's not able to do that. So that's the whole kind of system in a nutshell, and then all of this of course interacts with the actual Lego builds. One quick thing to mention though, the charging dock is fully within system in terms of its measurements, so you can easily integrate this into a Lego build if you wanted to build something that has a charging dock integrated within it. So that could be kind of fun. You could have some sort of a Lego power station or something where they're charging up the Smart Bricks for whatever future themes we're going to have for this. So that's kind of cool. This is Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. This is what comes with the set, including the Smart Brick here, single Smart Brick, and then the charging dock as well. As for minifigures, we have a regular Rebel Trooper here with the iconic white helmet, double-sided faceprint, but absolutely no Smart Play interactivity whatsoever. And next up we have Smart Darth Vader. So this is the one with all of the mechanics in it. The hips and the torso cannot be separated. Other than that, it is a normal minifigure. And then you have the printing on the back to indicate that it is a Smart Fig, as all of these do. And then lots of writing and logos on the side that are required for any electronic toys to have present on them, so that you know when it's time to throw this thing away when you're done with it, that you cannot simply throw it in the trash. Interestingly, all the Smart Figs come with short capes. My theory as to why that is that they want you to be able to easily identify which figures are smart based on whether or not they have a cape. You won't be able to see that logo very easily, say if this is in a big box with other minifigures. So they put the short cape on as a way for you to be able to easily spot which one is smart and which one is not. That's my theory anyway. And I've heard a very silly conspiracy theory that the reason why the capes are short is so that LEGO can save on cape material, but I got 2 whole extra sets of capes in one of my sets, so that's obviously not the case. But as I say, Darth Vader is a normal, standard Darth Vader that you would expect to see, other than the fact that he is smart, and he's got the printing on the arms there, which is very nice, and no printing on the back other than the fact that it is a smart minifig, and that's the case for all of them, but at least all around the rest of the fig he looks nice. So with this set, you are intended to put the smart brick into Darth Vader's TIE Advanced here. That's the only spot that is designated for it in this entire set. This whole side build, which is a little turret for the rebels to use, it's a nice enough little side build, but it has absolutely zero smart play functionality. There's no tag, there's no colors that will activate anything, there's nothing like that. And the figure that sits in it is also not a smart figure, so literally this entire side build is just for the look, and you can effectively put it aside. Now, of course, you can shoot the little studs from this turret, but that's something that you've been able to do with LEGO for decades at this point, and that's something that isn't particularly exciting, I feel like, in the face of a spaceship that has lights and sounds and makes pew pew noises. The next side build is this little refueling and repair station. So green in the smart play system equals repair, blue equals fuel, so the color sensor is able to see those when you place it in front of it. Just a little console right here, and then some spots for figures to stand. Now this is also useful because there's no place for Vader's lightsaber when he's in the ship, so you can just go ahead and stick his lightsaber in one of these empty studs and hold onto it thusly, and then we have a long flexible hose here for fueling up the ship. So we can place Vader into the TIE, and then additionally, if little kids are really struggling to be able to get the space to get in there, you can pull off this top section of roof. From the front, closed up, I think it looks pretty nice, other than the fact, of course, that you can see right through the back because there is a big gap here, which people are affectionately calling the smart hole. So obviously, the way that this system is designed, things have to go around the smart brick to activate it. So you have the red to activate the shooty sounds, and then you have the smart tag, and then you have the smart minifig that all need to be in close proximity to the brick. So that is the reason why they've left a giant hole for each one of these sets that has a smart brick for kids to be able to easily swap these around, because the whole thing is that everything happens from this brick. So you need to be able to put this brick other places in order to activate the play feature. So unfortunately here you get a big old nasty gap in the back that just really is immersion breaking. And then on top of that, we have the mechanisms, which are also very loud and announce themselves very prominently. So there you go, the red paddles will activate the shooty noises. I'll do the actual smart brick in a second, but the TIE actually looks okay. I like these prints right here, and I don't like the red and the blue poking through the wings. I think it's just unnecessary. But the actual front part and the side looks decent enough as a kid's toy, but then in the back here, it really feels too far compromised for anyone to really take this seriously as a real Darth Vader's TIE. So a lot of imagination has to go into this just to make up for the fact that you're using a brick which is meant to spark your imagination. So it's kind of a trade-off in that sense. So go ahead and wake up the smart brick, place it in to the slot here. There it is. And you can hear Darth Vader. All right, so there you go. And you have this sort of ambient noise of the TIE fighter as it's in flight. It reacts to how you move. You turn it upside down. You turn it upside down, it's like it's crashed, right? That's the kind of idea there. So you just get Vader, and it continues to make TIE noises. So it doesn't really act much like it's crashed, to be honest. And then if you pull on the trigger, you get the shooty noises. Now, you may have noticed none of these sound effects sound like Star Wars sound effects, and that is a shame, but I think it's just a limitation of the system. But, you know, you can shoot, but there's nothing that will interact with this to act like it's been shot, which, you know, is a shame, obviously, right? Oh, we're getting the Imperial March again. So then the only other interactivity you can have here is to refuel the ship. So do that. There's only one color sensor on this thing, so you can just do it from, you know, you have to find the correct side. So if you do it on this side, nothing happens. And we can do the repair function. So you just hold this in front of the color sensor. Again, not especially exciting. Kids naturally will want to, you know, hammer this thing on the top, but basically you just have to do this, right? So that's for it to be able to see the color and accurately represent it, and that's a shame. And then the other thing is, a lot of times this will activate the shooty noise if I just put my finger in front of it, because there's enough red in the pigment of my skin to be able to activate this and think it's the paddle. Man, that thing is going crazy with the Imperial March, my goodness. Okay, so yeah, it kind of gives you the same effect. And then, of course, anything that's blue or green from any other LEGO element will activate the refueling and the repair sounds as well. So one quick thing of note is that these are designed for very young kids to play with, and so they're mostly very sturdy builds, but this particular set suffers from a couple of things. So that happens. So a lot of times when I'm just placing Vader in the ship, the wings will just drop off like that because they're only attached with clips at an angle, and they kind of naturally want to get knocked off. So there's that. And then this build right here, you want to be able to kind of turn this dish around, right? But a lot of times, because of the way that this connection is established here, it's too stiff and you end up either knocking this little tower off like that, or you break off the actual dish itself. And I feel like this is all incredibly fiddly for what's designed to be, for 6-year-olds to play with. And then being able to angle like this turret and shoot, that's all very nice, but that stud is gone. Like, within 2 minutes of play with kids interacting with this, that stud is gone, so now you're down to 1, and then you just have the shooting mechanisms here. So if you have multiple kids playing together with this set, I really don't think there's going to be much for them to do, and I think they're going to get bored of it fairly quickly. The actual tie sounds and shooting effects and things are fine for what they are. You're going to run around the house for a couple of minutes doing that, and then you're going to do the refueling and the repair thing one time just to see what it does. But they're realistically, right, no kid is sitting here and just refueling Darth Vader's ship over and over again. There's no additional function to it. Like, for example, if the TIE fighter was to get shot by an X-Wing, set sold separately, then you could come in and refuel it with the hammer, and then that would take away some of the hit points. There's none of that. It's basically a preset couple of sound effects that will just repeat ad infinitum as long as you hold this in front of it. There's no sort of like, indication like, oh, repair's complete. There's no like sound effect to signify that you're done, or same goes for refueling. It'll just go and go and go until the battery runs down. And so there really isn't a lot to spark kids' imagination here within the set as it comes. So for $70 US, this is the cheapest way to get an all-in kit that gives you everything that you need. But of course, you can purchase additional smart bricks for around $20 on Bricklink. So if you have another set that you're interested in, but you just want to get an additional smart brick, I would say if you don't like this set, please don't spend the $70 for it. Just go ahead and get another smart brick on Bricklink. And they even sell the chargers on there too. So for $70, I think that this set is pretty bad, and as far as value goes, because you're getting a really compromised build that not a lot of kids are going to really get that much joy out of. The X-Wing is worse. This is a little bit better. But if you're a kid and you're playing with this thing, you're looking at the worst part of it all of the time, just by the virtue of how it's designed to be used. And you're going to be constantly taken out of your play experience by those compromises that had to be there for the smart brick. And then the amount of functions that you can actually do, you're going to get bored of those in just a few minutes. This one I think is a bit of a fail. I don't usually do letter grades for these, but I'm going to give this one like a C- or maybe even a D. So next up we have the X-Wing set here, and while it does have a lot more in terms of the side builds, which actually add a lot more play functionality to it, it is unfortunately the most heavily compromised build in terms of the way that the central thing looks. The X-Wing barely resembles an X-Wing in any capacity. We'll take a closer look at that in a minute. And this does again include one smart brick, which is a shame, as we'll see in a minute, for how many different things require a smart brick for you to really enjoy them. So first up we have Unsmart Ground Trooper here. So this is just a rebel sort of technician who goes around the base and repairs things and such. Looks very nice, but again adds nothing to smart play. Next up we have Regular Stormtrooper, who is a regular Stormtrooper. Absolutely nothing smart about this one, and no back face there, so just a regular medium brown skin with the female facial features, and that's your Stormtrooper. And then we have Smart Pilot Luke. He's got his lightsaber there, again the printing that you'd expect to see. Other than that though, it is a pretty standard Luke Skywalker. I really like the visor up face here and then the visor down face. That all looks very nice. But again, fused torso and hips there is a bummer, and also the fact that we have this beautiful printing on the front and then the distracting print on the back. But that's just part of the system. We just have to get used to it. But there's Smart Luke. And then Smart Leia, again, same deal with the printing. Other than that, a very nice looking Leia. The only trouble here is, of course, that a lot of times we tend to switch around the Leia legs for Leia skirt piece, depending on whether or not you want this to be more accurate to one scene or another in A New Hope. And then you can't do that here, obviously, because the hips are fused to the torso. So that's one thing that actually removes some functionality from this figure by making it smart. But there you go. Next up is Smart-2D2, and this one is a regular R2-D2 minifigure, other than the fact that it can swivel its head, which is a nice new novelty that we've never had before. The printing on the front looks very nice. And then in the back, we have a smart tag stuck onto his back. So by default, your R2 looks like this. Yeesh. And then you put the smart tag on, and Yeah, not much better. But you know, that gives it the functionality of being a Smart 2D2, which, you know, take that for what you will. We'll take a look at what it does in a second. But other than that, I think the fact that we can swivel his head is nice. So, you know, one step forward, two steps back. Each of the figures has their role to play, their little place to stand. We have a little side build here for the ladder that you can bring up so that folks can get into the X-Wing. You can be loading R2-D2 into there, you know, pretending. But it's a nice little build, and I actually really like the parts that are included in it, including these yellow clips, which are great to have. So this little data transfer tower here is designed on a ratcheting hinge, which makes it quite noisy and actually makes it kind of override a lot of the smart brick sounds there, which is frustrating. But we have the smart tag to let the brick know that this is a tower. So you place that right there. A little control station here. You can put any human figure here in the two studs, and then you have the spot here also where you can include an R2-D2, so anyone can be transferring the data. Again, same design of build here for the dish, which snaps off constantly and infuriates me. A nice clear sticker for this. All of the stickers in this set are clear backed due to the fact that one of them has to go over this transparent element. And I'll show you in a second how, even though they're clear backed, some of the stickers were still designed very poorly. Very bizarre, but yeah, this is a cute little build. And we have this little turret, so same sort of a deal there. It rotates around on the ratcheting turntable. It's got a little bit of detailing around the edge to make it nice and fun. Got some binoculars there, some pipes and things that look good. And then we've got the smart play paddle, so that activates the shooty shoot noise. And you have your stormtrooper sitting in here, and then also a couple of obviously stud launchers as well. So this I like better than the TIE Fighter, because the TIE Fighter you can make the shooty noises, but you can't make the shooty shoots. You can only do that with the side build on that one. With this one, you can actually do both at once, so a kid can be simulating the sounds and also activating the function. Next up is this little maintenance cart, which is fun. It comes with the rubber tires on the bottom, so you know, it feels like it's hovering, but it's obviously not. You can see there, it's just on the wheels. And then I like how this back section is free to move around. And then again, we have a spot for either an R2 or a human figure and the smart brick. This figure right here adds no smart play functionality, but you can put a smart fig in the front and that'll give it different noises. And then once again, we have a refueling platform here, a repair job back here, and then a spot for Luke's lightsaber when he's in his X-Wing. And the X-Wing itself. So obviously the proportions are all messed up. We really would want this cockpit piece to be way further back. We want a lot of things. We don't want this all under here to be as chunky as it is, using this massive boat hull piece. The landing gear awkwardly sticking out of this little gap that's left here. You know, everybody knows what an X-Wing looks like, and we know that this does not look like one. Just purely hand action for the opening of the wings there, or the S-foils, and then we have a little thing here that moves the smart brick in front of these red pieces to activate the shooty noises. A whole lot of room was dedicated to that here. This entire back section is devoted to being able to move this back and forth, and because this whole thing moves back and forth, that's why the canopy had to be so far forward. So it really is a shame that it the choice of how to do this messed up really the entire build. And there's much simpler ways that you could activate a shooting mechanism to get red in front of the color sensor without doing all of this. I really like the new canopy piece, other than the fact that it's so tall, but I still really want to build an X-Wing that uses this canopy piece, because finally we're getting one that's the right shape. It tapers towards the front like it's supposed to, instead of just going out straight and being 4 studs wide at the front. So I really like this piece, and I'm going to definitely do something with this. I did think it was a bit odd. The printing in here gets really thin at the back. I don't know if mine's misaligned, yeah, it feels like that back strut there is too close to the edge of the plastic. But anyways, other than that, it is a nice piece, and it just attaches with a couple of studs. We have our smart Luke sitting in here. He's got a little control console, and it looks fine and dandy. I mean, it doesn't really look like an X-Wing. It doesn't have like a flight yoke or anything, but it's fine. And then I like the way that these little arch pieces in here give him just enough room for his arms to sit. That's a cool look. At least, once again, we do have the ability to shoot with this, so you can be holding it this way, and you can be swishing it around, making the smart play sounds, and then you can shoot with these, and then you can make the corresponding sound, pew pew or pew pew. And of course R2, you have the smart play R2 in here, so if you want, you can just literally put a regular R2-D2 in here, disregard the smart play one, or you could just put the tag on top of the smart brick once it's in place, and that will still work just fine. So just a little pro tip there for people who hate it. Now about those stickers, why, Lego, am I getting a clear back sticker with mismatched gray, like very badly mismatched gray printed on it? Here it's not so bad because white is a lot easier to reproduce, but then back here again we have the very dark gray coloration in here amongst the yellow. You know, keep the yellow, but just leave the rest blank. And then same goes for this part right here. We have the very mismatched gray. Just to add a couple of highlights and a couple of little bits of panel indenting kind of details there. I really think they should have just left the gray out of both of these in particular. I've been getting horrible gray matching lately with all of my sets. Going back, past the $1,000 Death Star, I had horrible color matching in that one, and then way back before, there's been like a couple of years now where every single gray sticker has looked awful. So Lego, why? I don't understand. But yeah, other than that, it's a sturdy enough build. It looks okay from some angles, but you and I both know, looking at this thing, that it looks horrible. It doesn't look like an X-Wing, and I am going to attempt to fix that, post a video about how to make your X-Wing look beautiful and sleek and still retain the functionality of the smart brick, but there that is. And then if we place in our smart brick, we'll show you what this does. So, okay, thank you R2. So we'll switch this around. It makes the swooshy noises. It's fairly quiet. And then pushing that forward. Right, and because we have R2 and Luke in here, occasionally you'll hear both of them chatter a little bit, and then if you turn it over, it's blown up. That's the whole idea, right? And if you land it, okay, and if you land it, it kind of calms down a little bit. Now, you could have the turret shooting at the X-Wing to give it hit points, but there's only one smart brick, so you either have to have it in there or in here. So with the smart brick in place here, you can rotate this around. And it gives you the noises, and then you can do the shoot. So there that is. And if you swap in a smart figure in place of the Stormtrooper, you get just, there you go. You get noises associated with that smart figure. So there's that. And you can take your R2 and you can load him up in here too, and you can have a fully Rebel turret. And then if you knock this over, right, R2 is complaining that that you guys have been destroyed. So there's that. And then for the data transfer tower, that's kind of the main function, right? Is to transfer the data. You can place, like I said, Leia in here. So that's meant to represent Leia's voice. And then if you just turn it around on its own, it'll just make the sounds. If you knock it over, does it do anything? Kind of. Leia complains that she's on the ground. Yeah. So there you go. And then quickly, if we swap R2, it sounds very similar. There you go. So you get some unique R2 beeps and boops, right? But very much the same deal. And then finally, with the cart here, so it responds to driving. You can kind of doesn't really respond too well to like banking or speeding up, slowing down. It gives you a little extra juice when you go faster, but yeah, that's about it. And then you can refuel. Right, that's that. And of course, you can refuel the X-Wing. If the smart brick is inside of the X-Wing, you can bring the cart up to it, and then you can do that. So at least that's one function where you can use multiple smart elements side by side. And then, of course, again, if you mix and match your R2 or your Leia, you get those sounds mixed in as well. And then finally, just the right. So you can kind of pretend you're hammering it. And there you go. For $90, do I think this set is a good deal? No, I do not. I think that the limited functionality of each of the elements and how only the cart and the X-Wing can be used simultaneously just with the refueling or the repair, that kind of hampers the play all around, because you could either have a turret or you can have an X-Wing, or you have to buy an extra smart brick. Again, Bricklink, $20 to get an extra smart brick. Do not spend the $70 to get an extra whole set for that. And then you can have, as many smart bricks as there are smart tags. So you can place a brick here, a brick here, a brick here, a brick here, and then you can have everything going at once. Now, obviously, kids probably aren't going to want to do that. I think you really only need like 2 so that you can just have 2 things interacting with each other. So you can have the turret shooting at the X-Wing and vice versa. But overall, I would give this set, again, something like a D or maybe a C- if I'm feeling very generous. This X-Wing, if it looked a little nicer, which I'm sure can be achieved probably with some extra pieces. I'm going to try to look into that myself. If the X-Wing looked nicer, I would say that this is a pretty successful set, other than the fact that, once again, the smart brick is showing its limitations very, very quickly in terms of how it can be used for play. And I don't know if that comes down to the functionality that the brick has within it, or the ability of the designers to think of interesting things for the brick to do, and more importantly, ways for the different smart elements to interact with each other, right? Because the voices that each of the characters have are not very distinct, and when you place Leia in the X-Wing instead of Luke, they sound basically the same, except her voice is ever so slightly more high-pitched, or if you have an R2 involved, you get the R2 screams every now and then, but that's really the only extra thing that you get out of this. It doesn't feel like it's bringing the set to life as much as it feels like you're scrambling to find the one or two combinations of things that you can do that will actually make this work. Just very quickly, since I do have multiple smart bricks, if I shoot this, the X-Wing takes damage. If I shoot the X-Wing, the turret takes damage. But if I face these away from each other and I shoot, they still take damage. So the bummer is there's no detection for whether or not the smart bricks are facing each other or not. They do know if they're facing each other or not because they have the technology within these bricks to understand their relative positions, but they chose to have this be like an auto-aim situation where if you shoot this, no matter what, you take a hit, and vice versa. And that just, again, makes something that could have been a little bit of a game for kids if you spend the extra money to get an extra smart brick, to be able to have this little shooty interaction, you end up with something that's ultimately very unsatisfying still. All right, and next we come to my favorite set of the wave easily. I think this one has the most interesting functionality, and it was the one that came with the extra full set of capes ×2. We get the turret, the A-Wing, and the throne room, which kind of comes apart into the arena and the throne separately. We have our regular A-Wing pilot. I say regular because no smart functionality here. Great looking helmet as always, and a double-sided faceprint for more serious and more cheerful. So there you go. Really nice figure on that, other than the fact that it is not smart. Then we get the Royal Guard, and you get those ×2. Obviously short capes once again, and then just the standard black head, no printing on the face whatsoever there. You get their pike weapon, and they have the double-sided color for the cape, so dark red on the inside, lighter red on the out, and then just the simple robe printing for them. Very nice figures. Then we have Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker. He's got the new hairpiece that they've introduced in the throne room diorama, and of course this is another throne room diorama, so there's another one of those. Smart play printing, and then other than that, a very nice figure, and he's got the double-sided face so he could be more cocky and cheerful and more stoic and serious. So there is your smart Luke Skywalker. Next up we have smart Palpatine, and he comes with his classic lightning pieces. I had complained in the $1,000 Death Star set that I missed the old Palpatine lightning, and I like to think that my criticism is what brought them back, so you're welcome. We have the double-sided face, so evil and way more evil, and then of course short cape, as we know for smart figs. Printing, you've seen it by now. And there that is, and of course we have the writing on the sides as well, but it's not as prominent on this one because it's a dark gray printing on a black torso, so it's actually harder to see, and I like that. I think they should try to do a little bit better of a job hiding it with color matching like that from now on. But yeah, other than that, a very nice Palpy. And Smart Vader is the same Smart Vader that we got in the TIE Fighter. The main bulk of the set is used to make this Jedi battle arena here that is in front of the throne room. This is a separate build, but it just clicks together right in here. This whole section does want to fall off pretty much all the time, so you're probably going to leave it to the side when you're having your Jedi battles. There's actually some tires underneath here on their side integrated to keep this from slipping, so that's actually very nice. So when you're doing your play, you can just focus on the play and using these little rods to flip your characters all around the place, and then this thing will stay pretty well locked into the ground because of that rubberized base. So that's very cool. And then obviously the whole point in here is that you have a little Rock'em Sock'em robot fight, so we'll take a look at that with a smart brick in a second, and then Palpatine can be in the back here looking on and being evil. So then the throne itself is a nice little build. It's got these parts that clip on at the bottom for these little like power generators or whatever these are supposed to be, but they again do fall off pretty much constantly. So again, you're probably going to have those just disconnected when you're actually playing with it. But I like the build for the stairs. I like the spots here for the royal guards to stand at and some railings here for safety, so that's nice. And then the Palpatine's actual throne here does have a place to place the smart brick, so you can have some chair sounds. In the back here, we can see a very simple build, just very utilitarian with the Technic, and then a little spot containing a secret Palpatine's lightsaber. And then the very nice window print here in the back on this dish with the ratcheting connection here. I believe that is a different piece than what we are used to getting, although I'm not 100% sure on that, but it is a nice piece. And then I did just want to call out here a very nice technique for building the back of this. This is actually the first time that I built a smart playset that had a technique that made me go, ooh, that's very cool. So yeah, just wanted to call that out. And then we have this Death Star turret. So this is an unmanned turret, and it's got a spot here for the smart brick. And then when you move this back and forth, it senses the red as it comes back here on the side, and then that triggers the shooty sounds. And I really like the overall mechanism for how that works. I think it's a really nice smooth function. And you can also rotate it, and it is fixed at this angle with a clever technique using a couple of hinge bricks in here that are offset in a clever way to basically give you that fixed angle. And then it's always kind of just facing up so it's ready for attack. So that's a good look. It's a nice looking turret. I do wish that it didn't have to have quite so much red on it, but the smart play system is very heavy into the whole, you know, red equals smart thing. So they're using that to signal with, so I get it, but yeah. It does distract from the look of what is otherwise a very nice looking turret build. Next up is the A-Wing, and this is easily my favorite starship that we've gotten in this, the series so far as the all-in-one smart play sets go. The only thing, of course, that's a shame is that it has this annoying part back here where it's open, but I actually did do a tutorial video already of how to fix this to make it look really nice, so there's that. But out of the box, you know, you have this big red lever here, and then the smart brick goes in there, and you have your standard swooshy and shooty sounds. The pilot looks great in place, and he's got a nice little console in there, but a fairly plush, color consistent seating area in there, and I think that looks pretty nice. And then I think, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that this is a smart A-Wing, I think the techniques in here and the look, the overall scale of it feels like it's one of the best A-Wings Lego's ever done. So I actually really like this one, and I just think it's a shame that it had to come in this series. So the technique of how they got the fins in here brick built is very nice. That actually is a kind of a call back to the very, very first A-Wing that Lego ever did. And I never was a big fan of the pre-made fins that they were using for these, one-part fins that are out of scale. So I think this actually is a better solution overall. And I think it's just a very nice little ship. So yeah, good job on that. Very curvy, very sleek, and a world of difference away from the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter, which are just so deformed in order to accommodate for the smart brick. This one feels like they did the minimum amount of messed up stuff. So then let's take a look at the smart play. So we'll go ahead and place these bricks in place here. So you can knock the Royal Guards out of the way first, and then you can go to town fighting each other. And it has some, there you go. It has some hit detection, so you can see there the flashes and the little clashing sound. So basically, if you just have a sharp jolt, an impact, it gives you that sound. And then yeah, you get Darth Vader breathing, and then you get Luke just sort of chatting every now and then. He'll say something. And then if you knock them off, so as you saw there with Luke, if they get knocked off, there you go. Darth Vader has been defeated, therefore he's breathing very heavily. And then if Luke gets knocked off, such a delay on that, my goodness. But yes, you get the whir sound that comes out of that. So I actually think that this is fun. I think that the way that this is set up is cool. Unfortunately, because this is a lightsaber smart tag, no matter who you place on here, whether or not they would canonically have a lightsaber, like you put Leia, R2, it's still going to make the lightsaber sounds, but just mix in their particular vocals, and then you can still do the same smashy, right? So there's that. But I actually think this works pretty well and is actually quite fun. And then placing this on the throne, you can hear Palpatine, the Imperial March. Yes, thank you. We've heard it before. Oh my goodness. Okay, so then you spin the chair and you get some Palpatine dialogue. You can kind of jostle it. That'll encourage him to say some evil Palpatine croakies, and that's basically that. And if you sit Luke in here, it gives the Imperial March once again, and just gives the Luke dialogue instead. And for Vader, once again, Imperial March once again. So whoever sits in the seat gets the Imperial March. But then just on its own, it just does the seat swirly noises, the whoosh. And then for the turret, so it's currently in the shoot position because it's all the way back, so I can push this forward and then like have it come back. So there you go. You know, it's an automated turret, so it's not designed to have any minifigure accompaniments, but if you just go ahead and stick a minifigure anyway, you can see, you get the sounds of the character who's speaking thrown in there a little bit. It's kind of random, you know. Right, there you go. And then if I go ahead and place the smart brick here in the A-Wing, we have takeoff noises. flight noises. Right, it kind of responds to how quickly you're going, so you can really take off. Right, so there's that. And then we have the shooting noises. And because I have the smart brick in the turret right now, it's making the corresponding blowing up noises. And you can turn this over and there you go. Same deal as you'd expect if you place a Luke or a Vader or whomever in here. You just mix in their particular vocalizations, and then that's the only thing. So that's pretty much all of the extent of the smart play for that, other than the fact that if I shoot, this takes damage. You can keep shooting it. And there you go, you get the full final explosion sound, and same goes for this. So you can see we're building up the damage. But yeah, that's the interplay there. You know, for the person who's on the ground, they don't have a minifigure to worry about. It's just an automated turret thing. So it's fun for them to just, you know, kind of target, you know, pretend to be targeting, because as I said, there's no actual targeting on this. It will register a hit no matter where you are. And with this one, you know, it's fun to be able to fly around and swoosh it. Some pretty good functionality there as well, especially because you have two bricks that you can actually interact with at the same time. So my overall thoughts about this set, it's good. Is it $160 good? Nope. I would give it probably somewhere in the region of a B+ in terms of how they've executed the ideas here. I think that they work well, and they've actually thought through how kids can play, multiple children can play at once with this and have fun. So you could start out here in the battle, you can move on to the space battle, you could take your smart bricks and you can place them in the turret and have that shooty stuff unfold. You can spend a little bit of time messing around with Palpatine in the chair, and then you can go back to, let's be real, the lightsaber fighting, because that's what you're going to do most of the time. I think that the ideas here were executed the best of all of the 3 smart play sets we've gotten so far. The fact that there are 2 smart bricks means that you can actually have fun with this as a set, and then also the fact that you can purchase 2 additional smart bricks for $40 as opposed to having to shell out for another Vader's tie or the X-Wing set means that you can have as many smart bricks as you want in here for a more reasonable cost than what people are making out online. Everybody's saying you have to buy the smart play sets in order to get the bricks. That is not true. But I think, you know, out of the box for $160, are you having $160 worth of fun here once you actually build the sets and once you actually play with it? I don't think so. But I think that, you know, that's just simply how expensive the smart bricks are for Lego to produce, and why I think producing them in the first place was probably a mistake. The other thing that's kind of disappointing is you can't do anything out of the box. If you really try to imagine fun scenarios, the smart brick doesn't accommodate for that. So I can't shoot the throne with the turret, for example. If I have a single lightsaber plus the A-Wing shooting at the lightsaber, I can't have a lightsaber deflection noise or something, right? There's no interactivity between the elements. It's only designed to do the one thing that it's designed to do, and do that pretty well, mostly. But then there's no thought to mixing and matching, which is, you know, for Lego, that's a shame, because that's what Lego's meant to be all about. Overall, I would call this set pretty much a success. If you can get it on discount, you'll probably be a lot happier. So here you have the full lineup of Lego Smart Play all-in-one sets, and I think overall I would consider this to be pretty much a failure. And the problem with it is that at its conceit, at its core level, the Smart Play system was meant to be a brick that can adapt to how you play, and unfortunately the actual amount of play that you can get with these bricks is extremely limited and will definitely bore kids within minutes. Of course, you have the fun of building a Lego set, right? That's can't be discounted as part of the experience. However, you're building sets that are, for the most part, compromised in order to accommodate a brick, and you have to overlook that. Then you have to overlook the fact that once you actually get the brick going and you actually do the things that it tells you to do, you're sort of stuck, right? You can't remix this in the same way that you can a Lego brick. I can't just make this make its own sounds and noises and functions, because there's only a few things that it can do, and it's very, very limited in terms of which tag and which figure are interacting with it or close proximity to it. And therefore what you end up with is a system that seems like it has unlimited potential, but actually locks you into only a very few specific play patterns And that's a really big shame. So I think having declared this a failure, now I would like to tell you what I envisioned when they announced Smart Play and what I think the system could and should have been, and how I hope that LEGO improves it in the future, because this thing, there isn't an app like in the traditional sense to use the smart brick. There is an app, however, to push updates to the brick. So if you get a smart brick, you also have to get the smart brick app if you want to keep this firmware up to date, because later on down the line, as you get more and more things introduced, these are not going to be locked to just Star Wars, right? But they're going to need to be updated down the line to accommodate for the new functions and things that they're going to introduce. Interestingly, also, there is a microphone in these, and LEGO says that they're going to use that for some sort of additional function that hasn't been announced yet. Although, of course, LEGO swears up and down that they are not recording you, they're not transmitting any data, there's no ability for it to do that. And people who've actually opened these up and who know about tech have confirmed that that is the case. So yeah, it's not like this thing is spying on you, but there is some sort of functionality that they have in mind that they have not yet deployed. So I'll be intrigued to see what that is. So here's what I think is the single biggest shame about Smart Play. Number one, there are smart figures involved. I don't think you need smart minifigures to be involved whatsoever. In fact, what I think they should have done is very similar to what they did with R2-D2. They should have introduced regular minifigures with the ability, like a specialized neck bracket piece that has some studs on the back that allows you to put a smart tag onto a minifigure. That way, you get the best of both worlds. You get the functionality of, because let's keep it real, all that this does is it produces a Vader voice sound, right? And yeah, okay, it shows, oh, Vader's been knocked over, and you wouldn't be able to get that functionality out of the smart tag. So if I'm doing the lightsaber dueling and I knock R2 off, there's not enough technology in this 2x2 Lego tile for it to have the ability to know that the figure has been knocked over, right? So I get that. But I think that having that ability just to be like, ow, right? I think instead of developing an entire system where minifigures are universally reviled by collectors for having, the extra prints on them and the fused bodies, right? We know all that. People don't like that. Instead, they should have gone with a smart tag only system, and there should have been so many smart tags that activate so many different functions. In addition, okay, so since we do have smart minifigures, to me, the fact that that's all that it can do when you're interacting with just a brick and a figure, it's just that's crazy to me. This, if I go like this, should be making a walking sound. If I go like this, it should have a Vader jumping sound. If I go like this, it should have the Vader death sound, right? That to me seems like an absolute given, seeing as how there's so much technology in this figure and in this brick, and the fact that there's just nothing for them to do when they're just interacting by themselves seems crazy to me. So I think that what this should have been used for is to bring any element to life, regardless of whether it's in a vehicle or has the relevant smart tag. It should have just been able to bring this to life by default, right? Kids, the way that kids play, they're gonna just have their figures going around and talking to each other, but you can do that and then you're done. There's no other function. Like if you just leave these here, they will not talk to each other any further. They will not do anything unless you bring them back in again. So yeah, that to me seems like the most major missed opportunity. And then the other thing is, in order for this system to work, you have to swap it in and out of these slots, which they've left, right? To me, it seems silly to have a smart tag built into a large build and then put a smart brick on it. Instead, I think what we should have had is a system where the smart tags get placed onto the bricks and they could be stackable. So you could have multiple different functions stacked up, and then you put that brick into a normal looking build and you get the same level of functionality. So if this system worked the way that I'm proposing, you'd have a Leia smart tag either attached to the minifigure or free floating, and you would place that on here, and then you would have a turret smart tag and you would place that on here, and then now you have your turret functionality, and you can just put this to the side here. You could put it anywhere on the build and it will do, or you'd probably want to put it on here so that you could have all the swiveling and stuff, right? But then you'd have all of the functionality built into the brick, and then you could concentrate on having nicer looking builds that don't have to have quite so much stuff going on, because all of this is a requirement for every build. All of these mechanisms, the paddles, this whole monstrosity, all of that is required simply to maneuver things in front of the color sensor of the brick. And then also just the fact that, like I said, this doesn't do anything on its own. When I'm just playing with this, that's the only thing I can get it to do on its own, unless I'm interacting with other things. Now the other thing is, depending on whatever Lego color I scan with this, it should do stuff, right? If I scan red with this, yeah, it's not in an X-Wing, so it's not going to make any shooting sounds, but there should be something, don't you think? I don't know. I feel like, to me, this feels like a very dead brick when I'm not specifically using it for the thing that it's intended to be used for. And that, I think, is the biggest shame overall. The system is so locked into very, very specific limiting play patterns that don't even interact with one another. There's a few instances where I can do that. So I can have the cart, and I can have the A-Wing, and I can have the A-Wing shoot the cart. All right. However, as much as that feels initially like it could be a game of some sort, it isn't, because there's no way for me to, say, for example, use the repair function that comes with this to then take this back from being critical back to being green or safe. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing, right? You can do the repair function, it'll make the repair noise, right? But it's not smart in the sense that I've just damaged this with this A-Wing. There's nothing to say, whoa, friendly fire, because this knows that this is a Rebel Alliance A-Wing shooting a Rebel Alliance cart. There's nothing to say, hey, why are you shooting me, right? There's none of that. So all you have is shoot, receive damage, make shooty sounds, eventually explode. And regardless of whether I'm repairing this constantly, this will still make the explodey sound. So let me show you that. So I'm just constantly activating the shooting. You see, I'm trying to repair it, and it blew up. So there's nothing to that. And I can knock this over, and it's dead. But if I try to repair it while it's down, nothing happens. So hopefully you can see what I'm saying about this being extremely limited in terms of its vision. They thought of a lot of things that they could make the brick do, and obviously with the other sets, the Smart Play compatible sets, there are other things, little sounds and functions that you can activate that way. But what it all boils down to is you place a color in front of it, it plays a particular sound, or you place a particular figure in front of it and it makes a particular noise. The lightsaber function is one of the more unique ones that they have in the initial wave, and I like that. But honestly, like I said, after a few minutes, kids are going to get bored. So the whole system feels like a massive missed opportunity to me. It does not feel like it brings Lego to life. It feels like Lego has to bend itself so far around this in order to be able to bring the tiniest bit of functionality that I think, honestly, people would have just preferred a light brick, like an update on the light brick that could have different lights based on different inputs, or give us specific nice sounding dialogue that actually sounds like the characters as opposed to the mumble thing that we have. And I think also the way that it's mixed in, it doesn't matter if a quote-unquote good character is interacting with a quote-unquote evil vehicle or turret or whatever. There's no specificity to it, and again, that just seems like a real shame. It's a system that is as wide as an ocean and as deep as a puddle. So very quickly, to wrap things up, my recommendations for if you are going to adopt this system and get a bunch of these sets for your kids, etc., I think the golden rule here is 1 brick equals 1 ability to have fun. So if you have a set that only has 1 smart brick, it's going to have multiple things that can be done with a smart brick and only 1 brick to use it. So your kids are going to be squabbling over who gets to play with the brick. In this case with the TIE Fighter, it's not as bad because really all you can do is refuel the TIE Fighter. So you can go ahead and just, do that. And that's probably the reason why this little turret section here doesn't have any Smart Play functionality, because there's no second brick to activate it. But then you come over here to the X-Wing, you have $90 worth of side builds and extra things that you can't use because the Smart Brick is going to be in the X-Wing 90% of the time. Let's keep it real. Or in the cart, right? Those are the two really fun things there. And again, you need a second brick for kids to really have fun and interact with this in any meaningful way. If you want to have the X-Wing blow up the cart, you come up with a storyline where this guy's actually an Imperial spy and you want to blow up the cart that he's trying to run away on, stealing the data from the rebels. Yeah, you can do that, but you need an extra smart brick. So the fact that the $90 set only comes with 1, and then the $160 set only comes with 2, to me it feels like that should have been bumped up by 1 brick on each. So it's okay for this to come with 1. This should have had 2. This should have had 3. So I guess if you're getting 1 smart play set for everybody to play with, and then you have like 2 kids in the house, make sure that you have at least 2 smart bricks. And again, Bricklink, you can get those. You don't need to buy a whole other set for that. $20 each for one of these. I don't recall exactly what the charging ports go for yet, but I will check that and put it on screen now. And you can get those as well. Obviously, if you have a whole bunch of smart bricks, you're going to want a bunch of these around. So by default, you know, one of these comes in each of the 3 sets. So I have 3 charging ports currently, and that's more than enough to obviously charge up my 4 smart bricks. So that's cool. And then if you do end up investing, that's just kind of what you have to keep in mind. It is a gamble because LEGO may support this going forward. They may have big long-term 10-year plans for this system, or it may just fade into obscurity. It may end up just being, you know, one of those experiments that LEGO just gives up on after a year. I do think also that Star Wars was probably the wrong theme to introduce it in. They'd started with something a bit more simple and child-friendly and with less specific and iconic sounds to try to replicate, then they would have probably met with more success. Something like a Harry Potter or Marvel, anything like that, where it's more aimed at kids and the actions are more simplistic. Harry Potter would have been great with spell casting and potion making, right? It's less action oriented, so that would have fit better, I think, than this. But I think they wanted to gamble with Star Wars because it's a big name and people love Star Wars, and collectors are going to get all the sets because collectors get all the Star Wars sets. But I do think it was a mistake. So those are my kind of final thoughts on the Smart Play system. I do have hope for the future. I hope that it gets better and they introduce a bunch more features in version 2. So that's my kind of hope for that, but I'm not going to hold my breath. All right, so on to the patron shout out for the video. And again, thank you to everyone who's watched up until this point. I very much appreciate it. So we're going to get to our patron shout out for the video. That's going to go to K Crane. But before we dive into all of that, I just want to let you know, if you do want to get some cool artwork for yourself, I like what you're about to see coming up right now, you can head on over to patreon.com/2bricks. There's a bunch of different tiers and options right there. So you can go ahead and sign up for any tier that looks good to you and get all of the different perks that are on offer. I'm very proud of a lot of the things that I'm offering on there. I'm really trying to put a lot into it and make sure that there's a good value there for people who do sign up to support me. So on with the shout out. This video's shout out goes to K Crane, and you may remember that I have assigned K Crane the character of Kraken already. Kraken is a pirate captain who wears a fake eye patch that gives him some cybernetic inputs and things, gives him kind of some extra senses, but mainly he wears it because he wants to look tough. I designed this character over a year ago, and my style has evolved quite a lot since then as I've been doing these, so I went ahead and did a kind of a retrofit on this character to give him a little bit of a boost, to bring him more in line with what I would consider to be the new kind of standard for these. And he's now got an emblem on his chest there, you can see. Captain Kraken is actually the leader of the Double Claw pirate gang, and I've given him a double claw weapon in the back there as well for melee combat, and I've also updated and given him a nicer looking custom pistol that is, you know, worthy of a pirate king. And then of course he also needs a ship, so that's what this video's shout out is all about. So I started off experimenting with some very basic shapes and some exploration based around kind of piratey things for my pirate captain here. So there's an upside down parrot, there's an old sort of flintlock musket turned upside down, there's a cannon, there's a pirate ship also turned upside down, and a hook hand there. So I kind of just played around with these shapes to see if anything would jump out at me. Just a really quick set of explorations there. I then drilled down on some of the designs that I liked and expanded them out a little bit further, did some more exploration. The one on the left I like there because it has sort of a quill pen for the sort of large harpoon cannon on the bottom. And then the middle one I liked initially a lot, and then I ended up going further with that, but then I changed my mind. But I like this one because it kind of gave like a Cylon Raider kind of a feel, and it also reminded me kind of a Klingon bird of prey a little bit. And those were unintentional things that actually just evolved out of me tweaking the bottom design there, that I just ended up kind of changing and tweaking until it ended up looking the way that it does. And then I did a more detailed exploration of the Cylon Raider looking one, and when I was done I didn't really like the overall look of it. I actually thought it was straying a little bit too far away from the Star Wars kind of visual language and what speaks to me, so I decided to go back to the drawing board and do another version. And then that's when I finalized this version here, which is based off of, once again, starting with that pirate hull and the 2 prongs at the front. I like the dual claw gang, the thing I kept coming back to. So the pirate crew here needed to have a flagship here that would represent their dual clawness. So obviously at the front there we have the 2 prongs that will enable the ship to skewer its prey, and then there's a boarding ramp on the inside there of the middle of the mouth, so that allows them to kind of like breach a ship's hull and then board. So I went ahead and did the other views of this thing to try to tie it down a little bit more. Obviously I'm doing all of this by hand, there's no AI involved or anything like that. I'm just straight up drawing these from my imagination and trying to get the views right based off of how I think it should look. And so there's probably a lot of inconsistency, but the general vibe of it I think feels pretty good to me. You can see there the wings are, I'm not sure if they're fully variable angle or if they just retract up for landing and then go down into this sort of aggressive downward angle for
general operations. I may play with that later on when I end up making a physical model of this. And then we have the, the bubble turret on the top. It's not like designed to be a glass turret that somebody would look out of. It's meant to be controlled from the cockpit there. And then also we have a little bit of a side panel that can fold out and has some missile launchers in it. And you can see that there on the bottom left sketch. Those missile launchers are open, and I took inspiration from the Slave 1 for that, particularly the Jango Fett version. And then I was happy with how this all looked, so I took it to final color. And here I'm depicting the ship cruising through some sort of a gassy planet atmosphere where there's some sort of mining facilities or something like that, and they're initiating a raid, and you can see all of the reaction from their engines to the environment, creating this very like smoggy, unpleasant runoff off of the back there. And then you could just imagine the fearsome dark red beast emerging from the clouds and then skewering your ship, and what do you know, you've been boarded. So yeah, this was a really, really fun one to design. I really had a lot of fun with it, and I hope that you enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about your character, Captain Kraken, and his vicious crew of pirates, which I will be expanding out the roster, and I will be having some characters down the line join along with Captain Kraken's crew. So that'll be fun, and we'll get to kind of explore a little bit more about what this potential fledgling pirate fleet could look like down the line. So I do want to start to tie these things together, so that's really fun. So there you go. I'm going to get to work on the next video because, like I said, I do have many things still to do. I really appreciate anybody who signs up for Patreon to assist me in getting through this very expensive hobby, purchasing all of the sets, like for example the Smart Play sets, so I can take an honest look at them, and of course helping me to purchase the bricks for my other projects, mocks, and the bricks that I need to make my 10-foot Venator, which, believe it or not, I am still working on. Yes, everybody's always asking me what's happening with the Venator. It's still coming. See you guys on the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and may the force be with you.